Hello there, YouTubers. Good to see you out there today. It's me, Mr. Drew, in case you couldn't see past my disguise. But today I want to show you what materials I like to use when I do a charcoal drawing. So let me clean this off of my face. And now let's go take a look at some supplies. So first off, let's introduce you to some charcoal pencils. And this is my favorite brand of charcoal pencil to use. It's the Primo brand. I really like these. There's other brands I've used. To be honest, I haven't used a ton of them, a ton of different brands, but I have used General's brand. I've used some other generic brand charcoal pencils. But these, to me, are probably about the smoothest charcoal pencil out there. At least that I've used, and I really like using these. So this is a nice set. You can get a set like this at Hobby Lobby. It comes with a sharpener, this nice black hard eraser, which works well for lifting up the charcoal. And then it comes with the white pencil. There is the B, a 3B, and an HB. So kind of similar to the graphite. There's a lot of similarities here to some of the graphite supplies that I used. HB is going to be your hardest one, so that will leave the lightest. I mean, none of these will leave light marks. It's charcoal, so it's all going to be pretty dark. But the HB will be the hardest of them, so leave the lightest marks. Then the B will be kind of a medium soft, and then the 3B will be the softest, which can leave really nice dark areas. So those are the pencils. As far as sharpening, so you can use those regular sharpeners, just a regular little handheld sharpener, that's fine. I still like using the razor to sharpen them to get a longer point. This one's dulled down some, but kind of that same technique I showed you on the graphite supply video, where I'll take a razor and just carefully carve away. You have to be even more careful when you're doing this with charcoal pencils, because they can be really fragile, even more fragile than graphite, and so the tendency to snap, unfortunately, is there. But you just got to carefully shave away the wood, and then if you remember, put it down on the surface of the table and then just rotate it and lightly scrape it to get a point. And then you can use your sanding pad to just kind of rotate the pencil and wipe it across that sandpaper, and you'll get a nice sharp point. So let me try to do a little bit here with this one, try to get it back to a sharper point. And you can actually save this charcoal powder if you want for doing larger areas to block in. You can buy compressed charcoal powder. I'll show you that in a second here. So using the sandpaper, whether it's just a piece of sandpaper or one of these sanding blocks, that can help you get that point back on your pencil. With the pencils, once they start wearing down, I think I forgot to show this to you all with the graphite supplies, but there's pencil extenders. There's different thicknesses. So these are a little bit thicker than regular graphite pencils. But the nice thing here is once your pencil gets really short, you can just put it in there, tighten it down. There's some jaws inside of the collar here, and that will extend your pencil. And so even if it is really short, this gives you something to hold on to so that you can keep using your pencils and save yourself some money. So those are the pencils. Let me show you the compressed charcoal powder here real quick. I have it taped down because you do not want this opening up in your backpack or anything. That will be quite a mess. But this is just compressed charcoal that is in powder form. And so you can apply this with a brush or a towel or something like that. So speaking of brushes, I like to use makeup brushes for blending. I mentioned not using your fingers to blend in the graphite video. Same thing here, you can use your fingers, but once again, I just don't like getting the oils into the paper and into the medium there. So you can get different sizes and shapes. The nice thing about the makeup brushes is they're really pretty soft, so they work well for blending, and they can also work nicely for applying the charcoal. I just have a scrap piece of charcoal paper here. So you can just put a little bit, and a little bit goes quite a long way. So you can use that just as if it, basically as if it were makeup, and kind of float in some values. So you can use it with that. So like I said, I like using these brushes for blending as well as for applying some tones. Another tool I like to use is a blending stump. Now this is mostly known as just a tool to blend and soften areas, but I actually like to use it to draw with. Sometimes the pencil might leave maybe just a little too dark of a mark or too sharp of a line. And so this, if you load it with a little bit of that charcoal powder, or sometimes I'll even just take my pencil, make a little dark area on a scrap piece of paper, and then load my blending stump with it, and that allows me to draw, almost get these brush stroke effects with the blending stump. So I really like using the blending stump for drawing in little sensitive areas, or kind of getting this brush stroke technique, and also for blending. You can blend with many things. You could blend with a paper towel, you can blend with a Q-tip. Once again, I don't recommend it, but you can blend with your fingers. Another type of charcoal I like using is vine charcoal. So sometimes with these charcoal drawings, I will draw right on to the paper, my finished paper, and other times I will draw onto tracing paper and then transfer it to the paper here. The nice thing about the vine charcoal is it's pretty dark, but it also wipes away pretty nicely. Let me get my kneaded eraser here. The vine charcoal is going to wipe off a lot easier than those charcoal pencils. The charcoal pencils are a compressed charcoal, and that's going to be a lot harder to erase than the vine charcoal. So you see there is the vine. This is the regular charcoal pencil, and it just doesn't erase quite as easily. So the vine you can use if you're going right on your final paper. You can use this to put in your drawing lightly, and then if you're not happy with it, just erase it out. And keep doing that till you're happy with it. Then you can go over to your charcoal pencils and finalize your values and your lines. Another thing I like using is a chamois. You can get a big chamois at an automotive supply store or something. People use these to dry their cars. I get these at Hobby Lobby. I think they're like an artist grade chamois, and I think they're a little bit finer, a little bit softer than when you get the full size chamois at the store. So this can be used to blend, as well as just like the blending stump. Once you load up some charcoal on there, you can use that to apply some soft areas. So this works nicely to blend, to float in some of those softer areas, and this can also work if you have a very smooth paper. This can work as a little bit of an eraser. It doesn't lift up the charcoal as aggressively as the kneaded eraser, but it will lift. I'm sorry, I got some of that dust in there from that charcoal powder, so you got to be really careful with that stuff. Let me go up here. So it's not going to erase it as aggressively as the kneaded eraser. The kneaded eraser will lift up more, but it actually does kind of knock down those values. If you need to just soften an area, or maybe even lighten it just a little bit, you can use that chamois to lift out some value. Here I have some different tools I've used for blending. Here's a blending stump, a paper towel, a chamois, a Q-tip, a brush. So experiment with different things to blend or to apply the charcoal, and you can get some unique effects there. Another tool that I have used is a charcoal sock, and I learned this from a video by Casey Baugh when he was doing a portrait demonstration. So what he did is he took a sock, he took some compressed charcoal sticks, he tied them off into the sock, and then he smashed it with a hammer until it just turned into powder. So this gives you kind of like a pounce, if you've ever seen when people would do frescoes and they would do a drawing and they would run a tool along the drawing to leave little pinholes, and then they would take a pounce and just tap it over their drawing so it would translate these lines to the plaster behind there. So this you can use to also kind of do a little bit of a wash with charcoal on your paper before you start drawing in there. He did this on white paper. Here I have just a kind of a mid-tone gray paper. So speaking of paper, I like using a toned charcoal paper. Sometimes I will work just on a white paper, but the toned charcoal paper is fun to work with because it kind of bridges the gap between the light and the dark. So it allows that white charcoal to show up still. That white charcoal is lighter than the value of this gray charcoal paper. And then the dark charcoal is darker than the value of the paper. So that really saves you time as you're shading. You don't have to shade everything in. You can let that value of the paper bridge the gap between the light and the shadow. And it's a fun effect to work with. The charcoal paper is usually going to have one rougher side and one smoother side. This, I think, let's see here. Let's see what that is. I'd say this is the rougher side. It leaves a little more of a canvas texture when you apply the charcoal. And so that's a personal preference. If you want it to have a little more of a rough look or that canvas texture, then use the rough side. I prefer the smoother side. I think it allows me to get my blends more controlled in the way I want them to be, especially if you're doing like a small drawing, like a small head, you know, a couple inches tall. If you're doing a life-size head, it's easier to get away with that extra texture. But you know, something small, if you have a lot of this bumpy, grainy texture, it's just distracting in my opinion. So I like using the smooth side of the paper. So there's lots of options there for you as far as tools to apply the charcoal with, things to experiment with, different types of paper you can use. Once again, try to keep your paper acid-free. Try to make sure it's an acid-free product, and that's going to make it last a lot longer. So those are some pointers. I hope to do a charcoal portrait for you here maybe by next week. Hopefully, fingers crossed. We're starting our semester, so things are getting busy. But thanks again for joining me. I hope you learned something here, and go get yourself some charcoals and have some fun.